At its most basic level, wishful thinking is a practice of self-deception. How many times have you heard someone say something like, "It's time to stop talking about discrimination and race. We're past all that. After all, slavery's done, we have civil rights, and we elected a black president." And yet, all the social research indicates we are very far from over racial prejudice and discrimination. Discrimination is an uncomfortable concept. If we're able to look at the progress made in civil rights while ignoring how much still needs to be done, we can tell ourselves, "I'm not prejudiced." There is some value in practicing wishful thinking, especially in the form of positive thinking, optimism, visualization, and faith. These are characteristics that allow us to move forward even if all the evidence is rationally aligned against the objective. We must never forget, though, that any form of thought that is based on wishful thinking that does not include some measure of rational thought, action, and proof cannot be considered logical and cannot be used in academic arguments. Without proof to support it, wishful thinking cannot be considered a cogent argument. We all use wishful thinking as a way to deal with difficult problems or day-to-day anxieties. For instance, the couple with a troubled marriage may think having a baby will solve their problems. A student who is failing a class may choose to ignore posted grades so it's possible to keep thinking that passing is possible. The dieter will choose to believe one piece of cake won't really harm the diet. The person in a boring or difficult but low-paying job will choose to believe it's temporary, and it might be, even though many of us labor our entire working lives in that sort of job. Consider slavery and women's right to vote and prohibition and same-sex marriage. In each of these debates, there were people who knew they were standing on the wrong side, but chose to stay there based on their life experiences and understanding and their willingness to change and their values. If you ever have a doubt about whether you are experiencing wishful thinking, ask yourself for the proof of whether your brain or your gut is right. Take a careful look at the image on the right side of the slide. It was published with this very short article that I'll use to explain some of the problems with the wishful thinking fallacy and how it creeps in, often by being implied rather than explicitly denoted through the use of carefully reasoned but poorly supported argumentation. Quote, New York, New York. The number of people caught as welfare and Medicaid cheats in New York City skyrocketed by 45%. Potentially costing taxpayers millions in fraudulent claims. Individuals nailed for gaming the system surged to 28,335 in 2008, from 19,476 the year before, according to the City Human Resources Administration. A new Medicaid fraud unit alone nabbed 10,379 cheaters. HRA's staff of 177 fraud investigators discovered corruption by cross-checking information from welfare recipients against a database of banks and other computer systems. Phone and mail tips accounted for 19%, or 5,380, of the confirmed fraud cases. The number of rip-off cases has steadily risen, with 17,047 in 2006 and 13,889 in 2005. That has occurred even as the city's welfare caseload has dropped to 343,144, nearly the lowest tally since 1963, unquote. Now, for a bit of analysis, first, we see in the very first paragraph, the author is attempting to play to a particular audience. Notice the cheats have skyrocketed and will cost millions. All the modifiers alter the claim so its tone is more pejorative. This plays into the general wishful thinking of the populace that those receiving public assistance are greedy, not needy, as stated in the image that accompanied the story. There's a lot of data in this short piece, and it's designed to lead one to think the problem has reached crisis proportions. Let's start by accepting every figure and percentage as accurate. It's true there are no citations, but that's a common convention for news writing. We could, if the question were sufficiently serious, do minimal research to confirm the accuracy, but that's not necessary for this task. I'll be asking questions to show, despite the abundance of numbers, we do not have enough information to accept the author's point of view. Notice in paragraph 2 and paragraph 6, we have competing claims. In the first, we are looking at data comparing 2007 and 2008. In the sixth, we are seeing a comparison of 2005 and 2006. The numbers show a rise in fraud every year. 2005, 13,889 fraud cases. That's 4.05%. 2006, 17,047 fraud cases. That's 4.97%. 2007, 19,476 fraud cases. That's 4.97% also. 2008, 28,335 fraud cases. That's 8.26%. Looks pretty bad, doesn't it? That's especially true if I use the only caseload number to assess the percent of increase for all 4 data points, which I did. But this article does raise some questions. The biggest one that I would like to know is what the fraud average is for other social programs as large as this. Turns out 10% is considered a pretty good level in any really big program, and all of the fraud percentages are well below that. The other thing I want to know is what caused the big jump between 2007 and 2008. Did the big jump come from the new Medicaid fraud unit? We can't know because we aren't told what year those cheaters were nabbed, nor do we know if they are new criminal activities or whether they've been going on all along but weren't discovered because there wasn't enough oversight. I also want to know what relevance the phone and mail tips have to the number of fraud cases. Yes, we're told that 19% of the confirmed cases are the result of citizens providing information. Is this relevant to the percentage increase in fraud cases? Has citizen policing increased from previous years? If so, how much and why? What happened between 2007 and 2008 that might have affected the number of fraud cases? When I look back, I see a serious financial crisis in our nation. Is it possible the percent of fraud jumped because more people were in desperate need? Lastly, I noticed the entire article emphasized over and over how much fraud was being committed and how costly it was. That certainly helped confirm the opinion that many hold that welfare recipients are greedy, not needy. Nice soundbite, isn't it? The problem with that perspective is it completely ignores the more than 90% who need assistance and are not gaming the system. Why is it so many want to focus on the relatively small amount of fraud in the system while ignoring the massively great need it walks beside? The answer is wishful thinking. If the people getting welfare are cheating, then we all have a right to be angry that so much money must be spent to help them. We have a safe place to put our anger when expressing it to our bosses who ask us to work harder for less might end up getting us fired. Oh yeah, we are so good at lying to ourselves. How would you feel if you knew the President of the United States was being guided by astrology? As it turns out, Ronald Reagan's wife was so committed to astrology, she consulted an astrologer to determine the president's schedule. That had a powerful effect on the shape and direction of his presidency. If that's not scary enough, what about business? Business leaders are notorious for ignoring the historical fact that those businesses which do not evolve with the times and the needs of their markets inevitably collapse. Consider this short copied list. Quote, IBM once dominated the world of data processing. The IBM 360 was given its name because it surrounded your data needs by 360 degrees. No more, unquote. Quote, in 1970, Sales Management magazine described the 5 big U.S. tire manufacturers as enjoying unthreatened control over their market. Within 2 decades, 4 of the 5 were either bankrupt or had been absorbed by other firms, unquote. Quote, the A&P supermarket chain was once the nation's largest retailer. Today, it is a German-owned concern with stores in 6 states and the District of Columbia. As the once mighty business appears headed for the proverbial dustbin of history, the only remaining question seems to be paper or plastic, unquote. Quote, in 1896, Dow Jones established its industrial average of a dozen leading companies' stocks. A century later, only one firm on that list, General Electric, has survived as an independent entity, unquote. Given that history, we can only imagine what the futures of Google, Amazon, and Microsoft might be. The recent terrible recession that so damaged our nation is the direct result of wishful thinking by banking and other financial leaders. These are just a few reasons why wishful thinking is not a useful reasoning strategy. It can be surprisingly difficult to spot in text, especially if the author and reader share the same position. Wishful thinking is often expressed as an assumption, and the assumptions frequently overlap the stereotyping category.